WIKISPEED Modular Steering Knuckle, April 17th, 2014. This is an RSX wheel, an Acura RSX wheel, which has the same bolt pattern as the 2006 Honda Civic that we use. And you can see the brake caliper and the brake disc inside, and it's attached with Skunk 2 Black Series lug nuts. Now inside, you see something very different than you'd usually see. This is our modular steering knuckle. Now it's attached to the OEM caliper. These are 12mm by 1.25 thread bolts going through here, so 12.5mm holes in the plate it goes down to, and then it's shimmed another, I think it's 8.5mm to the caliper, and this is a 1/2 inch thick plate. Now this plate bolts on, and we have 2 bolts here to hold it for test, but it would use 4 for road use, to the bearing block holder, which holds the hub carrier and the hub, and we can access with the drive axle. Now this whole tab assembly is to hold the steering knuckle end, which is here on the far side, in order to enable front steering. So if this is the front of the car, an S2000 steering rack then has an adapter to tie to this guy. And we can see there's just barely clearance even on the OEM wheel. These provide our caster angle, and in fact they are upside down. We're looking at this upside down. Okay, now this is the front of the car, and now we have the correct caster angle. So the line between these coming out the bottom of the car, the gap between the center contact patch and the kingpin point, as it's called, is what gives us our caster, the ability for the steering to recenter exiting a turn. As we can see, this all fits inside the standard RSX wheel, and now what we need to do is find out by how much. So here's a $1.99 Harbor Freight caliper, which will give us to a millimeter easily, but not to 1/10 of a millimeter. And we see that we have right about, here's the depth gauge coming out, approximately 81 millimeters. So it looks like we have over 80 millimeters of clearance, because actually here we'd be right on top, and we'd actually have even more. So I wonder if it's actually even 85. Looks about right, and it looks like it's 84. Okay, and I assume the top would be the same because the distances are identical. Now for the steering clearance, we've got a much smaller amount of run. We have approximately, of course my hand is over it, approximately 16 millimeters of plate. Actually, it's going to be less. See if we can shrink that to make it right about right. Looks like 13 millimeters of clearance all through this system. And the drive axle, here is the short end axle from an R18A engine. And so this is a Civic knuckle. We just happen to be using an RSX wheel. Slides in perfectly. You can see we've had to recess to clear the plate, and our drive axle fits in the modular knuckle assembly. Success!